Viewers, with the typical white man's burden, the BBC has once again talked down on India. In a recent story, the BBC World says, why are Indian youth not arising and coming out on the streets for a regime change? Something what we witnessed in our neighborhood in Bangladesh, then Nepal, and also recently Madagascar. Now, what is this mindset, this politics, which makes these Western media platforms keep exhorting and provoking Indian youth, editorializing such opinionated pieces which often tell us what we must or must not do? That is something we are going to decipher during our show this weekend. But before that, a look at what's going on vis-a-vis our Western neighbor, Pakistan. Viewers, maybe Pakistan has been emboldened by some of the global developments, the geopolitical scenario, and therefore it tried once again to repeat that playbook of freedom fighters, in the process forgetting that it quietly and very clearly admitted sending terrorists to India. This was exposed by the Indian officials very squarely at the UN. At the same time, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar pointed out that the UNO also has to share blame for what's going on in the world. More than once, the UN has allowed one or the other power to jeopardize our fight against terror on some or the other political issue, and the time for reforms in the UN is long overdue. Let's listen in.
All is not well with the United Nations. Its decision-making neither reflects its membership nor addresses global priorities. Its debates have become increasingly polarized and its working visibly gridlocked. Any meaningful reform is obstructed using the reform process itself. When a sitting Security Council member openly protects the very organization that claims responsibility for the barbaric terror attack such as at Pahalgam, what does it do to the credibility of multilateralism? Similarly, if victims and perpetrators of terrorism are equated in the name of global strategy, how much more cynical can the world get? When self-proclaimed terrorists are shielded from the sanctioning process, what does it say for the sincerity of those involved?
So, with those profound words of the External Affairs Minister, let me move to our guests for this weekend. And I have two very interesting friends, both joining us from the United Kingdom. I have Pandit Satish Sharma, well-known expert on international affairs, a person who is rooted in the Bharatiya culture, though living abroad. Welcome, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskaram ji, Jai Shri Ram.
And also with us, Amandeep. You have been listening to him on earlier episodes on Media Scan. He is an avid writer, writes profusely on global affairs. Welcome, Aman.
Thank you.
And Pandit Satish Sharma, allow me to come to you first. Sir, very clearly, as pointed out by the External Affairs Minister, would you agree that the fight against terror globally has become more political rather than, looking at security issues, which should be the primary and only concern here?
Gee, it's a wonderful point to start with. Minister Jaishankar ji is known as being a very sober, reserved person who reflects deeply before making statements. And in diplomatic circles, he is held in high regard for that. And for him to make that statement, I think it's like a bell ringing. It broadcasts a change. He's absolutely right in what he's saying. But I would go as far as to say that the UN has never been a body which was intended to guide the world through conflict to peace. If you look at its history, it was established by the colonial powers after Bretton Woods. And what it's been singularly successful in doing is maintaining wars for a long period of time under the guise of seeking solutions. There is a saying which is attributed to Dante that those who in times of moral crisis maintain the neutral position, the hottest place in hell is preserved for them. And what the United Nations has done It has built its reputation on maintaining neutrality and building false equivalences between parties where there is no equivalence. It's become visible that the United Nations either has lost its way or its true purpose is being revealed. It's no longer a body which can say it's the protector of human rights. The very composition of the Human Rights Council screams that it has absolutely lost its moral compass. And I think the future is actually quite, from one point of view, quite grim, because the world does need a body which can stand for a rules-based order. But if the United States actually pull out of the United Nations, where there is talk that that's going to happen, and let's say Bharat continues with this sentiment, the United Nations will implode. It will lose whatever credibility and support it has. And I suspect that that is something we're going to see in the very near future.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions in the words that you have just placed here. But allow me to come to Amandeep. Amandeep, of course, I like your take on, this old question of reforms in the UN that India has been reiterating for quite a long time. But also, this very week, we saw something else happening. Once again, Pakistan tried that playbook of calling freedom fighters and how it is interested in freeing, people who are oppressed, etc. Very clearly talking about Kashmir. And our officials had to give a reality check, expose Pakistan right there and show that terrorists will remain terrorists and they cannot go by any other name.
The international community stands witness to Pakistan's sponsorship of cross-border terrorism and its use of terrorism as a tool of state policy directed against India. Peddling lies and making false equivalences will not help them achieve their goals, whatever they may be. I reiterate that the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir was, is, and will always remain an integral part of India. And the only unresolved issue is the vacation by Pakistan of illegally occupied parts of Indian territory of Jammu and Kashmir.
Your take, Aman.
Well, indeed. I mean, look, Smitaji, I think it's pretty clear for all the world to see that when Pakistan talks about so-called freedom fighters, what they really are jihadists and Islamist terrorists. But 3 points to make on this whole thing. First of all, the UN is a body that is for days old. It's a body that's way past its sell-by date. We all see how the real epicenter of what geopolitics is all about is the Indo-Pacific and the global south. And it's undeniable that under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, India has taken a lead to lead the global south in so many ways. And that's where real leadership is. The UN is the past, India is the future. Point number 2, as Prime Minister David Cameron said on his visit to India, nearly a decade ago, and it still holds true today, sadly, that Pakistan is the global fountainhead of terror. And that still hasn't changed. It's only got worse. We saw what happened in Pahalgam. And you know what? We have had the 7/7 bombings in the UK, whose perpetrators were trained in Pakistan. We had the failed 21/7 bombings, whose perpetrators were directed from Pakistan. And of course, who can forget Osama bin Laden was found in Abbottabad. Moreover,
so the question here, Aman, is, despite all what Hillary Clinton spoke in the past, and you just mentioned David Cameron's remarks, all these powers put together have not been able to reign in Pakistan, which is, where China always comes to protect it when it comes to proscribing organizations or individuals. Yes. Somehow it manages to get away.
Indeed, we saw what China did in the UN Security Council, and even more worse than that, Smitaji. What is really been happening is that the liberal establishment elite in the West, especially here in the UK, has a lot to answer for when it's had such a soft corner for Pakistan and is overlooked is Islamist terror. Let's not forget. We've had these liberal establishment elite look over and cover up the industrial level scale of the Pakistani rape gangs in the UK. So it's a real question that they have to answer, I think, at the next election, the next general election here in the UK, when they're all likely to implode.
Yes. Aman, thank you for putting things in perspective, particularly the history of what's been going on in the UN. But viewers,
indeed,
we are happy to be joined by Ambassador Sushil Singhal here, who has just joined me in the studios, and we'll also get a take from him because he has served Bharat in various countries across the globe. Welcome, Ambassador Singhal. And as you were just listening, sir, we were discussing what happened over the week, how External Affairs Minister Mr. Jaishankar had to point out what goes on in the UN, the politics behind the fight against terror. At the same time, Pakistan efforts to bring in that freedom fighter issue once again when it comes to Kashmir. So your quick take on the subject, sir.
Well, as far as the UN is concerned, EAM has very eloquently, pointed out what is going wrong with that UN. Because, we, like in any institution, when we started with UN in 1945, there were only 51 members. Now we have 200 plus members. But the distribution of power remains the same. And the global south, which is 100 plus countries, they don't have any representation. Correct. Everybody is talking about global south, their problems, issues. They are the one who contribute most to the peacekeeping operations. But when it comes to the decision making, they're nowhere to be seen. So any institution which does not give representation to the widespread, it is going to die down.
Chunk, yes.
It's going to die down. And so what EM has pointed out, Dr. Jaishankar has pointed out that if we want to keep the UN relevant, it is very important that it reforms itself and take into account the realities of today in the global.
But sir, a quick take also on this politics behind the fight against terror. Whenever, there is some organization to be proscribed or some dreaded terrorist, individual terrorist to be proscribed, we often see China coming to shield Pakistan in most cases. And the world's big powers are not able to do much about it at all.
Well, this is again a problem, the way the UN Security Council and veto power has been structured. That 5 countries have those, all the say, I would say, in how we govern the UN system or UN Security Council. The result is that whenever somebody's interest is affected, they immediately come to their rescue. You gave a very good example of Pakistan and China collaboration, I will use the term.
Yes.
That whenever there is any, because we all know what Pakistan does, and they openly say, like in the third committee, the discussion which has taken place, Pakistan, I think, has come out very openly what they are espousing.
Yes.
They're claiming that terrorists are not terrorists. I mean, from where they are, as usual, in their own usual way, they try to interpret the resolution, this 1991 resolution 46 they are talking about. Nowhere it is mentioned what they're talking about. So they create, their own interpretation. And similarly here, they justify everything in the name of, that they are assisting, they are not. First of all, they said, they are not there.
Oppression, etc.
First they said, there is not there. They are not simply there. Then everybody gave the evidence, even the CIA, they started operating there, they were targeting them. They said, well, they are good people and bad people. Now
so
that
all that
also
good
been
terrorist and bad terrorist debate.
Yeah.
But ironically, Ambassador, while saying that, talking about oppression and things like that, Pakistan actually very clearly admitted what we have been saying from the beginning,